Hello everyone, my name is Alex. I'm a 2000 rated over-the-board chess player, and in this series we're going from 1500 to 2000 elo in chess.com rapid games, where I'll be explaining my thought process as best as I can for your education and entertainment. Today we have a Vienna, and we have a Vienna Gambit after the move knight to f6, and I absolutely love this opening. I have a playlist dedicated to every game I've played in this opening, and I even have a full guide to the Vienna on my channel. And my opponent takes, which is a terrible move. This is not a King's Gambit, my friend, because your knight is on f6, and I can attack it, and you can't move forward, so you have to go back to g8. A lot of people here play queen e7, because they think, oh, I'll pin the pawn to the king, meaning that you can't take my knight, and also your pawn is under attack. Queen e7 is a terrible move. This position is something like plus 0.7. I think after queen e7, it's like plus 2. Because the queen is always vulnerable to knight d5 ideas with attacks on the queen and on c7. So my opponent retreats the knight. We need to stop queen to h4 check. You can technically play bishop c4 in this position, allow this check and go king f1, but it's far easier just to play knight to f3. And this is just such a nice position. The Vienna Gambit is so strong, and I have had over-the-board games, classical over-the-board games, where my opponents have gone into the gambit line and accepted the gambit and allowed e5, and I've just absolutely wiped them off the board, like against like 1900 over-the-board players in classical chess. It's kind of nuts. They were older guys, so, you know, Vienna is relatively new age, I suppose, in chess terms. But d6, okay. We never really want to take this pawn. It just means that bishop d6 can be played, f4 is defended, and black can play something like knight f6 and castles very quickly. We don't want to let him do that. We want to develop very fast, so I'm going to play bishop c4. d4 is also a move, but personally I like bishop c4. Because we want to start putting pressure on the f7 pawn. That is a move I've never seen before. Knight h6? Okay, what are you doing about d4 then? I'm going to open this up, and once I take f4, this is going to be a potential problem. If black takes on e5, I'm going to take with the knight to apply pressure, probably. Although here, I think the best move is actually just to castle. I think we just don't care. Or no, is it queen e2? Oh, I think it's queen e2, actually. Pinning the e-pawn. Let me think. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's queen e2. Let's play it. And this is just... You can see already, black is on the verge of crumbling in this position. I mean, there is so much pressure all down the board. He only has one piece developed, and it's a knight on h6. Maybe he can try bishop e7 and castles very quickly, but even if he manages to pull that off, I don't know, like bishop e7, yeah, he goes for it. How should we continue? I'd like to play knight e5, but I suppose that allows queen d4, which I suppose is annoying. Maybe we can go knight b5 there, attacking the queen and attacking c7. So let's say queen b6. Bishop f4, threatening the knight. It's an interesting position. What else can we do? Well, we could take with the queen, threatening g7. So queen takes, I assume you'd want a castle, which prepares bishop d6 or bishop f6 to kick my queen. If bishop f4, bishop d6, slightly annoying. We could just castle, and after black castles, again, we can't really take with the knight. Queen takes is annoying, because it also comes with check. Interesting position. We could take here with the pawn, and just prepare bishop f4, which restricts the movement of the bishop. I think I prefer that. Yeah, let's do it. DE5. So we will win back both of our pawns, unless black plays a move like g5, which seems ludicrous. So let's take. And the material is now equal. We've won back both of our pawns. There was never really much of a question of whether we would win back both the pawns. There's very specific lines where black can try and hold on to the f4 pawn, but it's very uncomfortable. Normally you have to play something like knight f6, knight h5 to try and hold on to it. But here, I mean, we literally have the perfect setup of minor pieces. It's basically a perfect setup. Whoa, that... Are you really going to allow that? That seems rather suicidal. Also, we can play rook to d1, hitting the queen. c2 is defended, so I'm not concerned about that. Maybe black's trying to drop the bishop back to g6 to secure the king side, which makes sense. I don't know, like, rook d1, if you're going to go knight d7, that's just really sad. If you're going to move the queen, again, that looks very sad. I'm just trying to develop with tempo. Okay, queen c8. Sure, let's take. Because we're going to ruin his structure, and then I guess we castle. This just looks completely dominating. I don't know the theory here. Like, I don't need to know the theory. We're just dominating the position. This is... Oh, knight to d5 is very tempting, going after the bishop and preparing something like knight to f6. That looks really strong. Let's say knight d5, knight c6, defending the bishop. I think knight f6 is a bit premature, because after knight f6, bishop f6 here, and rook to e8, our queen is pinned to the king. So maybe we just castle first. Maybe we castle. If c6 is played to stop knight to d5, then you're kind of limiting your own development, because then you can't put your knight on c6. So I'm not too fussed about that. You can play bishop c5 check, I'll just move the king, that's not a problem. He does go c6, yeah, but now you're stopping your own knight from coming to its natural developing square. You're probably going to have to put it on d7, where it's not clear where it's going to go from there. And it's blocking your queen. So, okay. Okay. This is an interesting maneuver, but obviously bishop c5 is a problem. We could go knight to e4, going for the same sort of idea. And if you take, then I think we're happy with that trade. That looks like it makes a lot of sense to me. I don't think you can allow knight to f6 check. I don't think you can allow that. But I mean, if you trade, how are you stopping a move like bishop to d3, just forming a battery with the queen, right? By the way, if you're enjoying the video so far, please drop a like and subscribe if you haven't already. I'd really appreciate it. Queen c7, okay, that doesn't really do anything. Maybe this is an idea to pick up b2, but do I care about b2? I don't know. I could give this check. Take. Knight d7. That looks pretty good to me. Looks pretty damn good, and I mean, I don't know, a move like queen e3. I could even play queen e3 now. Although, no, maybe then you can take. So, I'm going to go knight f6 check. I don't think we need to overcomplicate this position. Again, I know that queen b6 can be played to pick up my b2 pawn. But I don't really care about my b2 pawn. Okay. Queen e7 is interesting. Offering a queen trade, which I don't know whether you can accept. Because f7 hangs. Although maybe you can. Maybe you can accept that. But, I mean, just look at this black pawn structure. It's so bad. We could go queen e3. But then queen b6 does kind of force a queen trade, although we do have knight d4. Maybe knight d4 immediately, going after the bishop. And if bishop to g6... then queen e3. And how do you defend h6? That looks pretty nice. Knight e5 is also viable. Trying to play knight f7. And also open up an attack on the bishop. And after bishop to g6. Again, queen e3. that also looks completely winning. Which one do I want to go for? I don't think knight h4 makes any sense. I think I prefer knight d4 because we're blocking this diagonal, which feels very useful. And then what? Just queen e3? And how are you preventing queen h6? See, this is the problem with the black position, is that he just hasn't... His development is way too slow. Okay, you can go here, but after take, you're going to have to sack your knight, surely. I don't see any other move. Okay, I admittedly completely missed that. Still, though, this has to be completely losing. How can we do this? C3 is a viable move. But then again, you can never take, because I'll just take on f7. We're up a pawn, which is great. Knight to f5 can be considered, trying to go knight to e7. If take, that's got to be winning. f7 is so weak. Also, the knight is compromised. We could play a very safe king h1. I don't know, maybe queen e5 is annoying. I think I like this. Knight f5. Also, if take, we can just play a move like rook h5 to checkmate on h7. Yeah, but now can I do this? Wait, no, sorry, the queen controls that square. What am I on about? What about knight d6? Knight's under attack, f7's under attack. Here, knight g4. Queen f4 looks devastating. Let's go knight d6. Applying pressure to f7 with 1, 2, 3 pieces. Also, the knight is under attack. Material's equal, but I mean, the black king is just in dire straits. You can play queen b6, king h1, but you're not dealing with the issues of the position. I mean, if you're not careful, I'm just going to take here. If you move your knight, that is. And after bishop takes, rook takes, you're not going to be able to stop checkmate. So I just don't really care about the f6 pawn, because, like, it's great, it's restricting the black king, but he's also defending the checkmate, right? So I kind of don't care about that anymore, and now I'm changing my attention to go after the f7 pawn, because that seems to be the next avenue, and if that means sacrificing the f6 pawn, all that does is bring us back to equal material, which is fine by me, and opens up more lines of attack against the black king. Again, this is... That's interesting. That's interesting. So blocking my bishop's scope. My knight is now also under attack. Opponent's playing good moves. How do we continue? Well, if take, then take. If take, then I think you can take here, because any discoveries, you can always give a check. That's a very annoying move. Good move. I don't really want to have to come back to f5, do I? I missed this knight d5. That's a strong move. How do I continue? I mean, Yeah, like if I take and take, then maybe this is okay. But if I take, I think he takes on d6, which isn't good enough. I might have to just admit that I was wrong, which feels really, really sucky to do. I'd love to play Queen f4, but you know, obviously that would hang the queen. Well, at the end of the day, my knight's under attack. So either I need to move it or defend it. Because I don't see how I pose any other threats here. So I don't see another option. However, I suppose we are now threatening to just win a pawn. I should probably play King h1 when I get the opportunity, just to get myself off of this diagonal, because it's just a constant pain that the queen can always get out of danger by giving me a check. Again, I'm not really fussed about the b2 pawn. If it drags the queen away from the action, that's fine with me. Yeah, this knight is very annoying. Very annoying. Let me think. Okay. I think we still have very good attacking chances here. If anyone's better, it's clearly white, but there was definitely better ways for me to have conducted the attack, I think. Like, back here, I don't know, maybe there was something better that I could have done. Okay, rook e8. Makes sense. Suppose I should consider king h1. Although, maybe he wants to take and play knight e3, supported by the rook. So I could just take the knight off the board and play something like... no, that doesn't look nice. Take. Maybe knight to d4. Yeah, but then still bishop c2 is annoying. Queen g5 is interesting. Trying to get into f6, but feels a bit wrong. You know, something like here, if you go for this, then check here and I just mate you, but that feels flimsy. Bishop d3, knight e3. Well, if bishop here, here, we threaten mate, so you don't have time for knight d3, something like this. Yeah. What about here? Well, my knight's going to hang after take, and take, so... How do I deal with this? Bishop d3. Bishop f5. I think this is the way I want to go. Yeah, I'm going to go for this. Because I just think I want to secure this knight and then fight for the e-file. Feels like a good way to go about this. I don't think black can really afford to trade this bishop. Also, I've got to be aware of g2. And maybe linking up with the knight somehow. I've got to be very aware of that. Like I said, queen b6, I don't really care. You can pick up b2. I don't know. Then I get access to squares like d6, which feel far more important. I suppose you can maybe try and get a queen trade, but even down a pawn there, the weakness of f7 feels like a big deal. Really? So, what does that do? Maybe he's trying to trade queens. Okay. Now, what happens if I go rook to e1? You can't give a check. Let's say rook e1, queen e1, rook e1, rook e1, king f2, rook e8. Well, then I mate you, so you can't do that. I don't see a reason not to play rook e1. If rook e1, queen b2, rook e8, rook e8, I don't have mate on g7 because the queen defends it. But I don't know, maybe like knight d6. Rook's attacked, pawn's attacked, bishop's under pressure. That feels like a problem. Here, bishop takes if pawn... well, the rook's hanging. Yeah, that looks very winning. I don't really understand what the play is here for black. Unless he really wants to try to play the two rooks versus queen. Which is maybe playable, but with how weak his king is, it feels like I'm the only person who can win that. Admittedly, though, like I said, I have messed up somewhere because the attack should have been better than it was. Okay, queen f6. So you're stopping knight d6. That makes sense. Still applying a lot of pressure to my knight. Also makes sense. If I take, rook takes... If I play knight to h4, I suppose there's queen d4 check. Okay. You're kind of threatening to take, and take, because the queen is defended. Makes sense. What if... No, I can't do this with an attack on the queen, because there is queen d4 check in all scenarios. So what happens if I go king h1? Well, something like take, take, check, take. Material's equal. I think we're probably better because we have the e-file. Something like rook to d8. If rook e7, then I get mated. So, I don't know, king g1. Then rook d2 is annoying. So maybe not that. How should I do this? What about c3? Well, again, take... or rook takes here first seems problematic. So I'm going to trade. And then king h1? Or now maybe c3. I think now is the time for c3. Yeah, I like this. b2 is fine. There's no queen d4 check. And now I think we're preparing for a move like knight to h4. Again, if bishop takes, queen takes, knight takes, something like rook takes looks strong. King g7. The material is equal in the endgame, but our pawn structure is slightly better, and we have bishop versus knight, which should be advantageous to us. Goes for it. Do we have any other moves other than trading queens? I don't think so. I don't think we have a choice. Play rook takes. King g7 looks likely. He doesn't have rook e2, which is very useful, because our bishop covers. If he plays knight to d5, I suppose we just take here with threats. Okay, that's an interesting move. So he's threatening checkmate. Well, no, that's not actually checkmate. Hold on. If I take, and rook e1, bishop f1, let's say, knight e3, I suppose. So what about rook takes, rook e1, and rook f1? I should just be up a pawn there. What am I missing? If knight here, I just give it check? Yeah, and you don't have tactics on h2 in any scenario, because my bishop can always take on f1. Yeah, see, if I take with the king, then knight here. But if I take with the bishop, then I'm just up a pawn. Knight here, bishop here. I suppose there's knight d1 in that line. So if knight e3, probably bishop to e2, stopping knight d1. And then there's no knight c4. Okay, let's ask the knight what it's doing. Give my king a way out. Knight e3, then king f2, knight c2. The knight is not really of concern. It doesn't actually have many squares there. Yeah, so now the knight is dominated by my bishop, so I can safely walk my king into the position, knowing that there's no checks that are of any use for black. And this endgame should be winning. Yeah, especially if you let my king in like that. I was expecting king to f5. Because it's very easy to know this knight can't do a thing. Okay, let's just push. I want to just roll these pawns down the board and potentially use them as a decoy to force his king over here, to get my king over here. I spoke about a similar thing in a Patreon video I released yesterday, actually. You can get a free trial to that, by the way, if you check the link in my channel. Okay, knight to d7. Trying to come into c5. Then maybe a4 from there. So maybe I just go b4 to stop that. I don't see... Again, I'm just trying to stop this knight from doing anything useful. Trying to restrict its movement. And if my opponent goes c5, which he does, I just probably don't touch the position, because if take, I'll just take. So we'll start pushing over here. I probably could have considered king d5, which I'll probably play next move if given the opportunity. If king to e6, there's no bishop to g4, but there is pawn g5. And again, this king is going to get distracted, and I'm going to be able to bring my king over here. I suppose there's actually stuff to be said for b5, because if c4, opening up the c5 square for the knight, I can take, and if check, that's not a big deal. Let's take. Maybe, well no, if b5 freeing up b6, then I just nab that. Okay, he's trying to trade down, which makes sense. Well, here, then here. Then check. Take, take, if take, I take the knight, so king here. And then take, take. I don't think I want to trade too many pawns, because at the end of the day, if all of the pawns, apart from one, come off the board, then he's just going to sack the knight for the remaining pawn, and I can't checkmate him with a bishop. So I've got to be slightly careful. But if here knight c5... Well, if here knight c5, I just bring the king. And then, yeah, that's a problem. So I think that's okay. I think that's okay. And because of the geometry between the knight and my pawn, there's like a diagonal square between them, it makes it very difficult for the knight to ever target my b5 pawn, let alone the fact that it's defended by the bishop, which is at a distance, making it harder for the knight to ever target the bishop. I have to go something like knight to a4 to try and come to c3 or something like that. So let's say knight a4, king c6, knight c3. Yeah, he goes for it. Obviously, this is a big threat, forking absolutely everything. I could even consider bishop to c4, defending a2 and b5. Here, here, then just here. Well, the knight is currently defending here, so I'd have to dislodge it. here, here, bishop c4. That looks pretty strong. That looks very good. And if he doesn't move the knight, because he's currently defending, then what? I just dislodge it. Knight c3. Bishop b3. a4, bishop c4. I just hold on to the a2 pawn. And again, I can always play g5 to liquidate these pawns if I need to. Yeah, but here I just go bishop c4, defend a2, b5 is nicely defended. You can play a move like knight e4, but I don't know, I just take. And if I get 2 pawns, then your knight will not be enough, because even if it sacrifices itself for 1 pawn, I've got a 2nd pawn. And that seems pretty crushing. Okay, I'm not sure what a4 does. That feels like it's a... I'll tell you what I think it is. I think he's trying to get me to play a3 to stop the advancement of the pawn. So he can target it with the knight, but yeah, that's no concern. I'm just going to push the pawn. Just going to push the pawn. If you're going to sack the knight for the pawn, that's no problem. Although if knight c5, I can just go king c6, to be honest, because the knight has no good moves. Because both of these squares are covered by my bishop, and both of these squares are covered by my king, and both of these squares are covered by my bishop. So you have to go to a4 or e4, which are pointless because I just push. So yeah, knight c5, king c6, game over. And you see, I didn't actually do anything with these pawns. They're mostly there, just because g5 is always available, and black has to make sure that he has at least one more piece other than this pawn defending the g5 square, because otherwise I get a passed pawn for free, which he can't allow. So it's simply just to preoccupy his pieces. Let's go king c6, hitting the knight, and it has to move. It's all, you could also just push and allow the sacrifice, but there's no need. There's no need. We don't even need to bother with that, because we can just kick the knight away. I will be very interested to see where my attack went a bit wrong, because it could have definitely been executed better. My opponent didn't handle the endgame all that well, which was definitely a contributing factor to allowing us to win the game with relative ease. But yeah, the Vienna Gambit is super strong. I definitely could have handled the position slightly better, but let's jump into the analysis and see what the computer has to say. Okay, so 91.7% accuracy for us, 82.8 for the opponent. We definitely let the advantage slip. Definitely let it slip, and we're going to find out why. So we have a Vienna Gambit. E4, as you can see, is inaccurate because of e5, knight g8, knight f3, d6, and we go bishop c4. Engine hates bishop c4. It wants d4, and after de5, bishop b5. Oh, I forgot this line. Not gonna lie, I completely forgot this line. I should watch my own Vienna guide. I just got back from the gym. I haven't eaten yet, so forgive me, please. But bishop c4, knight to h6 is a mistake. It's a very strange move. Knight c6 is the best move. The reason we want to play d4, I believe, is because after knight c6, we go bishop b5, pinning the knight. And after take, we go bishop b5, because if knight c6, the knight is pinned. And if c6, then after bishop c4, there is no knight c6. So, a strange position, but bishop c4, knight h6, d4. de5, queen e2 is the best move. Bishop e7, de5 is the best move. Awesome. Castles, bishop f4, we're doing very well. Bishop f5, rook d1, queen c8, bishop h6. This is all the best. All the best for white. We have a sizable advantage. I think it's obvious why. Knight e4 is again the best move. Knight f6 is the best move. King h8. Knight d4 is okay. Knight e5 is slightly better. I was slightly concerned about rook to e8. However, there's just knight g6 check. So that's fine. So, knight d4 is still good though. Bishop g6. Queen e3 is wrong. So I considered queen e7, which is the best move, trying to get a queen trade. And it's very hard for black to decline the queen trade, because the rook is hanging. So let's say queen here, here, here. I couldn't quite figure out how I should handle this position. But the engine says, dude, just play rook de1. And if the knight moves, we take on f7. And if bishop takes, I mean, we're up a pawn, but, like, black can't really move. And I suppose this sort of thing is also potentially on the way. This is just a very nice position. I think, yeah, see, I was considering something like bishop f7, and I just wasn't convinced. But I suppose even here, we can just get on the back rank, and it's like, how does black defend this? Because the knight's pinned to the rook, and there's just no good way of removing my my rook from c8. So I went queen e3, which is still okay. Knight d7 is the best move. Queen h6 is fine. Rook g8. Knight f5 is the best move. I think here is where I went wrong. Here is where I went wrong with knight d6, which almost equalizes the position, but only after knight d5, which my opponent did find. Now, can you find the best move for white here? Well, the move is queen h4, targeting the knight. Now, what changes if knight d5 is played, like in the game? Well, the difference is, now the queen has access to f6, so I can play... Well, I can actually go queen d4 check. And if f6, I just take and I threaten to take. So if you take back, then at the very least you lose the exchange. And I just have a winning endgame, right? This is just game over. So I didn't realize the importance of that, of queen h4. And let's say you give a check and play c5 to defend the knight. Well, then I have like rook d6. Basically, I'm going to get hold of this diagonal. So you might be asking, okay, well, what happens if I just take? Well, then I take here. And after you block, then I just go up a piece. And what else can you do? Knight h5 is playable. Okay, makes sense. Now I get queen d4 anyway. Say knight g7. Queen f6. If take, rook takes. I guess f7 is the problem. Check here. Let's say here. Apparently I just go rook h5, bishop d3, and I would just win. So what, rook d8, bishop here, and then you have to sack the rook, and yeah, this is game over. I didn't realize that. I went knight d6, and everything would have been perfect. Like, you know, the sort of lines I was calculating was knight g4, queen f4, which is the best move. And you just have way too many problems to deal with, like queen b6 here, queen b2, queen g4, you know. So let's say you defend the knight, then it's just like, well, knight f7, and like bishop takes and queen takes, and this is game over. But I missed knight d5, which is the best move for black. My opponent did very well finding that, and the game is almost equal. Knight f5 is okay, taking is slightly better, which I considered. I thought after cd5, I definitely have an advantage. I have queen f4 or rook to d5. f7 is weak, I have good play. The reason I rejected this is because of queen d6. And after my bishop moves, I don't know, like check, king h1, and I'm struggling to find any kind of play here. I suppose maybe I can trade the queens and get on the 7th rank, but I don't know. This is kind of pitiful. A pitiful return for my great opening. So I went knight f5, rook a to e8, bishop d3, queen e5. Queen e5 is the best move. Good find. I went rook d to e1. Here I thought my opponent might try and go for this position, but I thought this should be good for us. I was expecting him to try to double up, but then I was like, well, I just have mate. So I don't know, like bishop takes, and this has to be winning somehow, which it is, because, I mean, the e1 rook is just hanging. So the best move is rook back to e6, which I admittedly didn't see, but even here I thought that white should have good play, just because the king is quite weak, and these pawns could be easy to go after. But queen f6, I take and go c3 to stop any checks, and the position is basically equal. Bishop f5, and my opponent trades off into an endgame. Now here I was expecting king to g7, defending. I was going to give a check, forcing the king back, and then play a move like king f2 to stop the rook invading. This was what I had in mind. There is a knight check, but here I thought we have to be the only side that can win this position, because the black king is out of the game, and these pawns are slightly weaker, and my king is more active. But he went knight g4. And initially I was like, oh, I have to play king h... I have to stop the checkmate. But then I realized, well, there is no checkmate. Now, it would have been a mistake for me to play bishop f1, because after knight to e3, just something like this, rook e2, and then this is just perpetual, right? And if I play rook to b1, then I'm very passive, and even though I'm up a pawn, I can't really win this endgame. So I went rook f1. He took, which was very kind of him. I was expecting knight to e3 in this position, and I figured this would be a mistake because of knight d1, and I can't defend both pawns. So let's say I were to go b3 and knight c3 and a4 or something. This is actually basically a draw. So on knight to e3, I was going to play bishop e2, stopping knight d1, which would fork my pieces. And if you go knight c2, then you're not doing anything. So king g7, I went bishop e2, hitting the knight, knight e5, and then my bishop just dominates the knight's movement. And because I'm up a pawn, and I have the bishop versus the knight, the bishop is far better in this position, because there's pawns on both sides of the board, and my bishop can maneuver between them very quickly, whereas the knight takes several moves to get anywhere. So I just bring my king. Here I was expecting king to f5 to stop my bishop getting involved, although the engine just says bishop d3. With a skewer, and after take, we're completely winning because we're just up a pawn in the king and pawn endgame. But b6, king e4, h6, h4, knight to d7, I go b4, c5. Here I probably should have played king to d5 on reflection, but I played g4, which is also fine. cb4, cb4, a5, I go b5, which is the best move. I rejected a3 on the basis of trading too many pawns. I didn't want to trade too many pawns, because like I said, if I get to a position where I have bishop and pawn versus knight, the knight can sacrifice itself for the pawn, and black can draw, because I can't checkmate with just a bishop. So I keep pawns on the board, knight c5, king d5, knight a4, and king c6. And here I thought I just have to be winning, because if you come back to a4, I will just kick you out. And then I will win the pawn, and then the game will be over very quickly. Because my bishop always has c4, defending everything. So a4, I thought was an attempt to get me to play a3, where I'm still winning, but, you know, black can try and fight here. And here, I only have one winning move, actually. Try and find the only winning move for white in this position. I initially thought of bishop a2, but this actually draws after king e5. So my only move is king c5. And if knight takes, king takes, then I can go pick up the pawn. And the king can't come around because I'll push this. So that's the only move. And if the knight goes to a square like c2, then I just push. And if you push, then I push. And if you push, I take. So it's winning. But king b6, a3, king c7, knight e4, b6. And I just go king c6 because the knight has to go to one of these two squares. And after it does, I just push and the game is over. So my opponent resigns. Very interesting game. The opening was incredible. Absolutely perfect opening. And then my opponent defended very, very well. I missed a couple of crucial ideas. Maybe some of you spotted them. Even though a couple of them I did notice, I didn't fully understand the, I suppose, the power of. But that's chess. Very interesting game. Hope you guys enjoyed. Like I said, if you want to learn the Vienna Gambit and the Vienna Game for yourself, check out my full guide up here. And if you want to just refresh your memory on some of the lines, like I probably need to, then check out that video. And if you want to see the previous episodes of the speedrun, check out the playlist down there. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in one of those videos.